Hey guys, Pie Guy Rules here, and the hardest part of the Seddie arc is over. In fact, compared to the other episodes we talked about, this one, well, almost made it into the Bizarro Bakery because in a lot of ways, it's actually a story about Sam and Freddie dating that understands a little bit of what the fans want to see in a relationship like this, and is not about them ruining other people's lives. But the reason why it is firmly in the bottom of the bakery, albeit the top of the bottom of the bakery, is because of its place in the storyline. As an individual episode, it's meh, it's not good, but it's not aggressively bad. But when you consider that they made this the last episode of the storyline, it's really obnoxious. And to explain what I mean, first let me give you the recap. This episode is about Sam and Freddie being urged by Carly to indulge in each other's hobbies because up until this point, they haven't really been spending that much time together, apparently. So Sam goes to Freddie's nerdy train club and has a miserable time and ruins a bunch of trains. Freddie meets Sam's extended family in prison and it goes similarly very poorly. Then, after overhearing Carly speak about Spencer and his inappropriately dominant girlfriend, they realize that they have nothing in common and should break up and just be friends. Oh, and it ends on a kiss. The previous episode did too, I just kind of forgot to mention it because there was a lot going on. The thing that gets me here is that the writers clearly understood how to tell this story. They understood that Sam and Freddie had basically nothing in common and shouldn't be a couple. This episode retroactively makes all of those speeches about how Sam and Freddie deserve to be together just even more infuriating because they obviously aren't meant to be together. They somehow believed their relationship was strong enough to justify Freddie having his future ruined, Gibby getting beaten up, driving Carly absolutely bananas with their bickering, and Sam believing that she's had a mental breakdown. Apparently, none of these things are big enough obstacles to stop the juggernaut of a relationship that is Seddie, and yet when they finally actually get to know each other and try each other's hobbies, that's when they break up? Are you kidding me? It's not even played as a joke, it's just anticlimactic. Sam and Freddie even tell Carly that things were fine until she insisted that they have to have hobbies together. By this episode, it seems like they've been dating for at least a few days, if not weeks. We definitely know they went to the movies together, so that's at least one thing they have in common. And oh gee, can I think of another hobby that these two might share and spend a lot of time doing together? It's only the name of the entire show. You don't need to like every single hobby that your partner likes. Of course you need to have some activities you enjoy doing together, but when your main hobby is producing a web show where you spend a ton of time together, you would think that maybe that hobby is enough to keep them together if that's the only roadblock in this stupid relationship. Honestly, it's not a bad message to send to kids that, hey, sometimes you get passionate, you like kissing people, and then you end up kissing someone that you don't really have a lot in common with or really work in a relationship with them. That's completely fine. But it just doesn't make any sense for this episode or the storyline. There are major reasons why these two shouldn't date. In particular, the fact that Sam is an awful, disgusting bully to Freddie. Or the fact that they argue all the time. But no, it's a lack of shared hobbies that these two people who spend hours and hours and hours together working on a web show and just hanging out as a group, that's the real problem here. The next episode has nothing to do with them dating. They don't even mention it in passing. We don't get to see Carly or Gibby or Spencer's reaction to the fact that they broke up. And somehow, in this repetitive, bloated storyline, they could not find space to show us what the iCarly fandom's reaction to Freddie and Sam breaking up was. Did they just kind of forget that they made the iCarly fans obsessed with shipping in I Start a Fan War? Or how about the fact that Carly literally polled the fans for their opinion on if Freddie and Sam should date? In real life, when internet celebrities or just regular celebrities break up, people care and people get mean and nasty about it. Maybe they were afraid of repeating what they already said and did in I Start a Fan War, or maybe they didn't want to have a repeat of the Fred episode where the internet just harasses Freddie. But it's such a natural fit for this show, for this storyline to end with Freddie and Sam making peace with their relationship being over, but having to deal with some sort of nightmare because the fandom won't let it go. This is more of a problem with the storyline as a whole, but getting back into something I don't like about I Love You specifically, for some reason Freddie is punished in both events. It's not even. When Sam goes to Freddie's train club, the train club nerds are sexist towards her and treat her poorly. And for once, her bad behavior actually seems kinda justified. But because she's mean to the nerds who do deserve it, Freddie gets kicked out of the club. But then, when Freddie goes to do Sam's thing, she forces him to smuggle hams in his pants, which then leads to her criminal relatives grabbing Freddie and trying to yank his pants down to get at the meat. And yeah, that sounds like a funny setup because of how absurd it is, but like with a lot of things in this show, you just kind of feel bad for Freddie, and seeing two grown adults trying to rip his pants off when Freddie is clearly in distress, it's just uncomfortable and bordering on some very weird stuff. But on top of Freddie being unfairly overly punished in this episode, Sam, of course, gets away with virtually everything. This episode begins with Sam saying she's going to go to the girls' soccer practice to hit them with golf balls. And this is not an empty threat or some offhanded one-liner. One of the girls comes into the school holding her head and has to go to the nurse because she's been hit with a golf ball. And this is all, of course, played for laughs. Even in the multiple times she apologizes to Freddie in this episode, she can't get through it once without making some sort of snarky comment about Freddie or his hobbies or interests, or saying that she doesn't actually mean her apology. Why can't Sam ever be made to feel uncomfortable or get punished or have consequences for her actions? I'm sure it happens somewhere in the course of the show, but time and time and time again, she does not face any repercussions, and if someone's going to face the consequences of Sam's actions, it's more often than not going to be Freddie. And as with a lot of things on this show, if you were to flip the genders of Freddie and Sam, they would not be able to get away with it. It would come off as much more harsh and disturbing and more overtly inappropriate that it probably wouldn't make it on the air. I also want to talk a little bit about Spencer's subplot because it is something. Spencer decides to date a woman who used to be his babysitter, and she treats him like he is a child and demands that he goes to bed, reads children's books to him, tells him that he can't watch violent movies, and basically just bosses him around all the time. Thankfully, Spencer and this girl don't get too explicit, but it's just kind of more weird and awkward than it is actually funny. Also, Gibby adopts a pet duck. It's only for like 2 scenes, but that part's kind of cute. And that closes the book on the Seddie arc. Yes, there are other episodes of other shows that talk about Seddie, and maybe we'll visit those someday, but for now at least, I'm pretty content with calling it here. As a whole, the storyline is really, really, really bad. Puts out some harmful messages to kids, as well as just being a poorly told story that hits on the same plot points over and over again. The show clearly does not know how to handle storylines because every episode basically resets things, no matter how unresolved things were in the previous episode. If you're rewatching this series because the reboot came out, just skip over some of these episodes. Go directly from IOMG into I Love You. It really doesn't feel like you miss much of anything at all, other than Sam mentioning she was in a mental hospital, and you get the least painful part of Sam and Freddie dating. Thank you all for joining me through this crazy multi-year spanning journey, and with that, Pie Guy rules.